Good afternoon, everyone. We are live once again, blackdoctor.org. Today we have a very hot topic. A lot of people have already chimed in about it, and a lot of people have been talking about it. But we are going to talk about COVID-19 clinical trials in our community. And I've already said it a million times why it's very important, but we have an expert with us, Dr. Amy Baxter, and we also have Kornelius Bankston, who you've seen before here at blackdoctor.org. And we are going to talk about this very, very, very serious and hot topic and very timely topic in what's going on in the world today. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
Hello.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
So Amy, let's start with you. Can you tell people about your company, who you work for and all of that great stuff so they can understand, oh, that's what she's talking about?
Sure. Well, it's kind of random because I'm a pediatric emergency doctor, and I developed a system for blocking needle pain called Buzzy about 15 years ago. Turned it into a device to decrease pain after surgery and for arthritis. And because of that, I had to get some NIH grants. So my company's Pain Care Labs, we make devices called Vibracool and Buzzy. Kornelius is on my board, but because of the NIH research, I got super interested in coronavirus when it first started coming out in February. So now, in addition to the work I'm doing on pain, I'm also doing a study on trying to prevent coronavirus.
Awesome. And Kornelius, like I said, Kornelius has been here time again, but you can tell us also what you do again, Kornelius.
Yes, my name is Kornelius Bankston. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia. I have a company called TechPlug. We focus on helping companies scale and grow, and we really focus on companies that have innovations in health. And really looking at underserved and marginalized communities, helping them to get access. And my background includes doing clinical research at Morehouse School of Medicine, where I help to get Morehouse School of Medicine and big companies like Merck engaged with clinical research with communities of color. So it's so great to be back. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So you guys, let's get right into this because we already have one comment. I'm gonna post it up here too. So
all right, we're ready.
So we're ready, and they're clearly ready. So first of all, let me just say, you guys, I think the audience needs to understand there is a reason why clinical trials need to be in different people, and there is, Amy, as a medical doctor, there is already drugs on the market that were found not to work the same way they worked in white people as they did in black people. For instance, there's hypertension medications that you should not probably subscribe to an older black gentleman that you might subscribe to an older white gentleman. And maybe you guys didn't know that, but this is why clinical trials need to be done in everyone. Now, one of you, if you could tell us who usually are the subjects for clinical trials?
White men.
Exactly. And I will say, and I've said it before on Black Doctor, I have participated in several clinical trials with research with asthma in Chicago. And they pay you well. And I know that I'm helping in a disease that I've had since birth that I inherited. So it's not a familial thing either. Hopefully what research they found can help my children, because more than likely they will have it too. And so I am a huge proponent for contributing. I also have contributed in one trial that's with COVID-19. It was something with testing our, I think they were trying to see if we already had the antibodies, even if we didn't ever have COVID. So we had to use a Lancet to test, to put our blood in a little thing and send it off. It was with the NIH. And so I did participate in that. They said they won't be able to let us know our results, but I know that at least I did do something. And I just applied for another study that is, I forgot. It's another study, to try and figure out COVID-19 and figure out drugs or whatever. I applied for that. I haven't heard back from that yet. But I am all about helping with the studies. And then, we need to be a part of the clinical trials, because if we're not, and so when I did the asthma clinical trials, yes, I've received placebo or I received the drug. I don't know. I was always under doctor's care, my own physicians, as well as the physicians there. So I did not, my asthma is really well controlled. I didn't all of a sudden go back to it not being well controlled because of it. So I am okay. I understand, because somebody, of course, says, we all remember the Tuskegee Airmen experiment. All of us do. But
you and I were probably alive then. I'm not sure that you were, Cornelius, but
right.
it didn't get done until 72, and that's even when penicillin was available since the 40s. So it's in our lifetimes.
Yeah. So, well, Amy, a little before mine, but it's okay. It's okay. But no, I understand people's concerns. I so totally understand people's concerns because it's real. The Henrietta Lacks.
Yeah.
All of this is, and I have a friend that's not from the US, and she said, I understand Black Americans having reserves about this. But I also think that that's why Cornelius's work is so important, because he is working at institutions that are Black institutions where hopefully you can trust those people.
Right. Yeah. That's one of the things we had, we were doing a COPD study at Morehouse when I was there a few years ago. And it was a challenge getting people enrolled. And even though you had a gift card that you could give them so that, they could go and buy groceries with, et cetera, but it's that whole education piece. And so I'm such a big proponent of clinical research, especially from institutions that we trust. I'm seeing the comments come through, and these are institutions that are well aware, like the Henrietta Lacks story, her life story. That film was shot, portions of it was shot at Morehouse School of Medicine. And they even have a day, like Gila Day, that is really surrounded around her life. So institutions like Morehouse School of Medicine, Howard University School of Medicine, Xavier University in New Orleans, you have Meharry, Charles Drew with LA. These are institutions that have Black and brown people's interests and health at the forefront. And so, and I know Amy can give some insights around the training that is done every 2 years for individuals to stay abreast of these things so populations can't be taken advantage of.
Well, or at least we're trying really hard to prevent that.
Yeah.
So after the press actually came out about Tuskegee and revealed what had been going on in 72, by 1974, there was a congressional act for research, and it required that there be training. And so by 1978, the Belmont Project was done, and every single study had to involve the ethical considerations of justice, of beneficence, so making sure that the research itself was actually going to benefit people, and then also respect for autonomy. And so every single study has to be respectful of the people making the decision, making sure they know exactly what's involved in the study, but also having considerations for vulnerable populations. So there's populations who are incarcerated, populations who are children, pregnant women, and all of these have specific extra steps that you have to go through if you want to research in this area. But even more importantly, the NIH and research organizations realize that unless we're actually including everybody in the studies, our results aren't generalizable to everyone. Just like you said, Dr. Renee, I mean, if you have a drug that's not tested in African Americans and it turns out it's dangerous in African Americans, there's only one way to know, and that is to make sure that when you're doing the studies, you have a representative balance. So every study that we do, we're trying to keep the balance of the people who are in the studies, both ethnicity and race and age differentials, trying to be balanced. And if it's not balanced, then you have to justify why you're not trying to make sure that everybody's included equally.
Right. Let me just say something to that. So someone made a comment. So the Henrietta Lack comment I made, her work was done at Johns Hopkins, not at Morehouse School of Medicine. So to clarify some things, that taking advantage of her was not done at Morehouse School of Medicine. That was done at Johns Hopkins when they took advantage of her. The thing that I was really saying is we have institutions here in the United States of America that looks out for our best interest as it relates to clinical work. And we can go into this whole conversation around why it's important. When you think about the genetics, and we're going to talk a little bit about this as it relates to COVID-19 and how, our genetics are different based on our race and our ethnicity. So those are things that we have to really take into consideration. I just want to make one point before I just turn it back over, because this is very powerful. Today, 3.8 million Americans have been confirmed with COVID-19, and 143,000 people have died. And out of that, 23% are reported. The 23% of the reported deaths are from African Americans, and we only make up 13% of the population. So how do we get ahead of that? And so that's why I was so excited to have this conversation. I'm going to send it back over to Dr. Renee and Dr. Amy Baxter.
So, Dr. Baxter, can you please explain to us why you find that it's so important that we are participants in the trials?
Well, would you like to talk about the specific trial? And
yes.
Okay. All right. So about end of February, beginning of March, I was aware that African Americans were suffering disproportionately already. And in fact, Kornelius, in Chicago, actually 68% of the deaths are in the Black community, and only 30% of the population is Black. So it's even more disproportionate other places. And so at the time, I wasn't specifically trying to figure out whether there was a reason for the racial differences, but I was trying to figure out what a weird disease this is. I mean, as a pediatrician, the kids usually get the diseases, and that wasn't happening. And older people, it was almost a linear slope with the going up to the sky at the end for the older people. That doesn't make sense either. So the more I started thinking about it, I thought, okay, what is different about these people? And one of the biggest differences was lack of smell. So the fact that the people who were getting COVID weren't able to smell. So I thought, all right, well, what's different about the nose? So one thing that was really interesting was that obesity was already playing heavily into who was likely to get coronavirus and be hospitalized and have severe illness. So I started trying to figure out, what is it about obesity, about age, about race, and how do all these things fit together, and age, to make the pattern that we're seeing that's so weird with coronavirus. So it turns out it's all wrapped up in the ACE2 receptors. So you may have heard, so basically you've seen the coronavirus that has a little stalk with the ball on the end, and it goes into a receptor in your body. So it turns out that these receptors in your body are called the ACE2, and this is called the spike protein. So the spike that goes into this receptor, it can't get into the body unless it has another gene that's along with it. So this genetic expression that you're talking about, it can't get into the body unless the receptor is the right size, and it can't get into the body unless the pH that the virus gets on, and then it hooks to the cells, and then if it's in the right acidity or basicness, then it can go into the cells. So it turns out the only place in the body where you've got the right ACE2 receptors and the right genetic code turned on is in the nose. And in children, they don't express both of those genes. And as you get older, you express a lot more. You express a lot more in places where there is pollution. You express a lot more ACE2 receptors if you are obese. And if you have a bigger nasal cavity, men over the age of 70 have humongous noses. So, well, not noses, but the inside. So I started thinking about this whole concept about, here's where it's going in to the nose, and then it goes back into the nasal cavities here. And this is one of the reasons why I said the smell center is up here. And this is one of the reasons why people lose their sense of smell. About 81% of people with coronavirus, if they're actually tested, with their eyes closed and a scratch and sniff or a thing of coffee or peanut butter, 81% of people have lost their sense of smell. So it sort of fits in with this whole thing about the aerosol and breathing it in, but it still didn't explain why there was such a disproportionate burden on the African American population. So there were two studies that I found that might have some bearing on this. One of them was that the acidity in the mucosa, the nasal epithelium inside the nose, it was a little bit more acidic in Black Americans than in white or Latino Americans. And then there was another study that was done that was looking at trying to do nasal drug delivery. Like if you've got asthma or if you've got allergies, sometimes you'll take Flonase and you'll squirt it up your nose. Well, the particle size matters. And so it turns out that whites are not able to catch big particles as easily, and Asians, and African Americans were not able to catch small particles as easily. So coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, is a huge particle, and it probably needs to be a little bit acidic for it to join up. So I started thinking, if we could rinse out the particles, if we could make the environment inside the nose a little less acidic. And if we were able to dislodge the particles, maybe this could be something that was specifically helpful to the African American community, as well as myself.
Dr. Baxter, I got a question, because I'm seeing the comments pop up, and I think we need to kind of help people understand. One, you're not selling anything. And the thing that you're really trying to help everybody understand that's logged in is how this virus could potentially get into our bodies and how it responds to us as Black Americans. And so if you could just give me another kind of example, because you were telling about a receptor that's in the nose, and these receptors are different from, the size of it can be different from white Americans, Black Americans, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, etc. And so you're saying that maybe the size of the particle of the coronavirus as it enters through the nasal cavity could be a size that, because were you saying our receptors are larger? Not the nose size.
I have no idea what the size of the receptors is, but the particles, the drug particles in the study that was looking at uptake, those drug particles were taken up really easily by whites and Asians, but they did not get taken up as much in African Americans.
Okay, so you're saying size matters as it relates to delivering particles to this receptor.
Right. And but when the medications were bigger particles, whites and Asians weren't able to pick them up as easily as Blacks were. So the study only went up to 50 nanometers, and coronavirus is 120 nanometers. But it's certainly possible that the size of the coronavirus itself is so big that it's not lodging in the nasal epithelium. They're called goblet cells. So actually, they're the receptor that the virus sticks on is on the end of a wiggly piece of, it's called ciliated. But basically, when you get mucus or something in your nose, there's little things that push it out so you can sneeze it out. Those are where the virus has to lodge on. So it's already moving. So at first, what I was thinking was the places in the world where they have very low death rates from coronavirus are the places where they do something called nasal irrigation. So nasal irrigation is, you may have heard the ads for Navage, which is basically putting saline in one side of the nose and having it come out the other. And in places like Southeast Asia, they'll use just a squirt bottle, sometimes a neti pot, if you've seen that, but it's, you're dunking salt water in and it's really flushing it out the other side. So in some places of the world, India, Southeast Asia, this is a very common part of hygiene, just like brushing your teeth. Those areas where they did more nasal irrigation had very, very few coronavirus cases and almost no deaths, like Thailand, Laos, Vietnam. So that was when I started putting all this together, was maybe if you have been in a place like a grocery store and you can avoid breathing in the particles at all, maybe that'll help you not get coronavirus. So I started thinking, okay, like a swimming clip. I actually wear this if I go to the grocery store, because almost all, you sound weird, but almost all coronavirus is going in through your nose. It's not the mouth, it's not the touching your face, it's not the licking, but it's actually breathing it in, and it has to be breathed in over a long period of time. This is why the family contacts really matter. Or if you're the singing case in Washington, there was a group of about 120 people in a chorus, and about 68 of them got coronavirus. They didn't touch, they distanced, they stayed apart, but they were singing with no masks. And that's one of the big cases which makes people think that the aerosol, the entry through the nose, is part of how people are getting coronavirus.
Wow.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Dr. Renee, these comments, I'm looking at these things, they tick through, and I'm like, whoo.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So I mean, the neti pot, which is I think neti pot is actually a brand, but you can use all sorts of things to nasal, nasal syringe. There's all sorts of ways you can clean out your nasal passages. And honestly, in places like Atlanta where you guys have high pollen levels,
Yeah.
it's probably very beneficial that you do this, especially if you're someone like me that suffers from allergies.
Mhm.
So that is, that's a great thing to know, that this could be the one thing that helps you to not get COVID-19.
Well, and we don't know yet. And so,
yeah, of course.
Now I do know that the irrigation part, the studies that have looked at it for other coronaviruses or that have looked at it for flu, it's important that you start it early. One of the real advantages we have in conquering coronavirus is that it takes such a long time from infection to symptoms to really getting sick. And that implies that we've got a time period there that we can do something that can influence the course of the terrible immune response that gets people in the hospital and sick.
Okay, somebody said, and you addressed this, does the saline solution explain why children aren't getting this as much as because of their nose drops? No.
Yeah, it's the expression of the gene. So first of all, children have tiny noses. It's like, Frozen when he still has a little bitty nose before he gets shoved in the back of a carrot. Maybe I've just seen too much Disney. But because their noses are so small, children don't even have sinuses fully developed until they're 12 years old and up. So first thing is probably just actually the size of the area that they have to get it. The second thing is that I told you got to have those two genes. There's the TMPRSS gene and the ACE2 gene. If they're not both turned on, you can't get coronavirus. And children do not express that gene in their nose, but about 1/10 to 1/100th of what adults do. So probably what's going on is that it's that children are not, they don't have the receptors. They don't have a place for the coronavirus to enter, so they're not getting sick as much. After age 12, all bets are off, but the younger ones, that's probably what's going on.
Now, can you tell us about the work that you're doing in Atlanta to help with the coronavirus?
So we're actually doing this in Augusta for a couple of weeks.
Augusta, I'm sorry.
So, well, one thing is, I've been doing pain research for the past 15 years. I am not an epidemiologist or an infectious disease doctor, but I do know how to do research and I know how to look at things. So when I started looking at this, I talked to the emergency department down in Augusta, which is where my clinical appointment is. And that just means that I do a lecture for them on occasion, but I'm not seeing patients. And I said, hey, look, this is what I think is happening. Are you guys interested in doing research? And I tell you what, if I'm wrong, I'll write it, I'll put my name on it, and nobody's embarrassed. But if I'm right and this really works, then you take somebody in your department and let them put their name on it and let them get famous because they're still in academics. I'm doing something else. And they liked it. They liked the idea. They had people that were interested in research. And more importantly, they were seeing the same kind of demographics that were concerning me in Atlanta. They've got a population that's 50% Black. They had ICUs that were getting filled up with patients that were even more disproportionate to their population, and they didn't know why and wanted to try to help. So the other big thing about Augusta is that they are able to turn around their samples in a day. And in Atlanta, we're still taking like 7 days. So we needed to do the study in a place where it was soon enough to where people know that they're positive, that there may be something that we could actually do to help. Once they've been sick for 7 days and they got their positive a week ago, it's probably not going to help much because viruses spread virally. They get more and more and more. So we needed to do this in a place where people probably didn't have a lot of symptoms yet and were just getting tested to be safe so that we would have the chance to do something while there was still time before the virus had a chance to take over.
Okay, thank you. So have you been able to find anything as of yet, or you're just still in the, because I'm obviously this just started months ago, right?
Well, it started months ago, and first of all, I was trying to get funding to do this. So I went to everybody I could. I went to all of the business people I knew. I went to women's groups I'm in. I went to physicians doctor groups I'm in, progressive doctor groups I'm in. I went to everybody and tried to find people who could put in just a little bit of money to do this study. And did not come up with anything. So I went to the two companies that make the nasal irrigation devices and contacted NeilMed, they do make neti pot, and they also make the squirty thing. And I went to Navage because I didn't want to have a conflict of interest with one company funding it. I was just like, look, will you donate what we need to get the study done? And we're not going to just use one company. We're going to do 50-50. Will you do that? So once they agreed to do that, by then it was May and the cases dropped off. So we decided to hold off on putting it through the Institutional Review Board to check for safety until July 7th. And I actually got an email right before I came on here with the final version that we're putting into the Institutional Review Board. So what the review board does is, first of all, they make sure that the science is sound, that if we do the study, there'll be enough people involved that we'll be able to get some results that mean something. The other part of the study was, I didn't want to have one arm get a placebo and one arm get the squirter, whether it was a neti pot or Navage or the NeilMed. I wanted to make sure that everybody who was enrolled had a chance to get something that would make a difference.
Yeah.
Doing nasal irrigation feels weird. So what we're actually going to do is look at the results of the severity of illness and who gets hospitalized based on how many times they do the squirting. We are assuming that doing nasal irrigation twice a day will probably be enough to make a difference. There are about 11 other studies right now in the country and other countries that are looking at some form of nasal irrigation or nasal squirting or putting betadine spray or trying to prevent the spread in healthcare workers by using hydrogen peroxide. I mean, I'm not the only one who's come up with this idea. There's a lot of other people looking at it, but nobody is looking at it in the populations that are getting hardest hit. And nobody is looking at doing twice a day irrigation after you've already got a positive and you're desperate to try to find something to do to help.
Yeah, right. Oh, awesome. So I'm just, Dr. Renee, I'm just getting caught up in some of these comments over here.
I knew it.
And Dr. Baxter is doing an amazing job with explaining the science and the reason for doing this, and that she's putting her own money into the research to try to figure out how do we get a solution that's affordable and to people that need it most. But I just want to address some of these concerns around this is something that disproportionately impacts us as people of color, just like diabetes, just like heart disease, just like all of these huge these chronic diseases that we face. And we can sit here and say, take lemon juice all day long, but it's not helping our grandparents. It's not helping the people that need it most. And so for those that have these chronic conditions that live in food deserts because of food insecurities, that do not have healthy food options, and it's a whole nother conversation to be had. How do we get the healthcare that we need the most to the people that need it the most? We have to engage in these kind of conversations and become better educated on this system and how to proactively change things that impact our community disproportionately. I'm sorry, I'm about to get on a tangent.
No, that's cool, but to be perfectly honest,
it's real hot, and I got on this little sweater, and I'm trying to calm down. But I really want people to understand that this thing is serious. I see things about man-made diseases, viruses. Okay, that's your opinion. But for those of us that work in this space and that have done research for years and have committed our lives, like I've spent all of my academic training and all of my professional life in this space. This isn't something that we play with. Let's give an example. Genentech is a company that is located in South San Francisco. They made millions of dollars by developing drugs only for a small subset of people so they can charge 100x. That was a business model. So we got to stop playing about you taking advantage of Black people. We are not trying to take advantage of Black people. We are really trying to get information to you that you can understand and use that information and take it to your clinicians, take it to people that work on the front lines and challenge them around why aren't you doing this? What's going on with the nasal passages? What's going on with the tension? We're trying to inform you. I'm sorry.
No, you're right. And Cornelius, I just read some other things. You know, Google is a great resource. It's probably not your best place to go for medical advice, though. So just because it's on Google and just because someone did a YouTube video about it does not mean that is absolutely the truth. So, just be aware that when you do Google these certain things, what you read is what somebody wanted you to click on so that they would get paid, because that's what's called clickbait. So they wanted to get paid every time you click on it. And if they do a hot topic like COVID-19 right now, I can only imagine how much the checks are that are coming into them. So just be very cautious that you don't read something and take that for the Bible truth when it probably is not.
Yes, not.
And so the other thing is, I really am leery for people, and we've said this a million times here, Black Doctor, make sure that whatever information you have comes from the right source. Because if you go to spread that into the community, that does nothing but harm the community if it's not true. It doesn't help us. It harms us. That's how, young people can't get it. Well, you guys look at the numbers now. The people getting it are young. So we can't, and then, at the very beginning of Black people couldn't get it. So, and then look, we're the ones that were dying the most. So you guys have to be very careful what information you take and you listen to, because it may not be true. And I understand that Google is great and everything, but if you didn't go to study this like Dr. Baxter and I, didn't study medicine, or you've not worked in this field as much as Kornelius has and understand, then you probably need to make sure you seek resources like blackdoctor.org, like a WebMD, or, other places that are actually, have CDC at this point. Please go to the CDC. Listen to Dr. Fauci. Don't listen to nothing I say. Listen to Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci was the editor of one of our major textbooks in med school. I'm sure Amy's very familiar too. Harrison's, yes. And Dr. Fauci was at the top of the list, which means he was like the best, okay? Because they put those people in order. So Dr. Fauci is the one that I listen to, and the only person I listen to and trust, because I know he knows what he's talking about. He's been here a long time, and he's been through other viruses and stuff. He knows what he's talking about. So you guys just please make sure you get the information from the right sources. But all of this comes back to, and even Dr. Baxter would agree with this, I think, you need to go to a doctor you trust.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you don't trust them, then leave. I don't care if they're Black, if they're white, if they're Asian, if they're whatever they are. If you do not trust that person with your life, then leave. Your life is in their hands. So if they say to you, hey, I think you should try, there's this clinical trial going on, and if you don't trust them, then I would run too. But if you trust them, then why would they bring this to you?
Let's talk about vitamin D really quickly.
Yes, very important.
One of the other things that's been found in a number of different studies is that people with low vitamin D are more at risk for severe outcomes, hospitalization, and death. So vitamin D is one thing that is particularly important in the dark skin community because there's lower levels of vitamin D. So if you're not taking vitamin D as a supplement, it's absolutely something that's helpful for coronavirus. And if your vitamin D level is fine, you don't need to take it. But if you don't know, there's many good reasons to add vitamin D. It's a good antiviral, and it's definitely correlated with bad outcomes in coronavirus.
And Dr. Baxter is not saying that something that has not been said on Black Doctor already. If you guys recall, we had Dr. Pierce, who is a COVID survivor. She's also a pediatrician. And she said, if anything, you should take vitamin D. And she said that because, one, you guys, first of all, we live in Chicago. So in Chicago, Dr. Pierce and I, we live in Chicago. Chicago, we just don't have enough sunlight to get, period. Secondly, we all were cooped up in our houses or, and not getting enough sunlight because we couldn't go to the beach or go outside for a walk, et cetera, for so long. So definitely you got vitamin D is the one thing that we have said that several times. You need to get vitamin D. So thank you, Dr. Baxter, for saying that again. Also, the other thing I want you guys to realize from what she said with the whole nasal passage thing is, if this is not a better reason than any, please wear a mask. And I'm mad I didn't bring mine down with me, but put your mask over your mouth and your nose, not down here, not over here. Put it exactly. Wear your mask and wear it properly. This is why you need to wear it, because COVID-19 is coming in through your nose.
The other nice thing is if you've got somebody who comes over to the house who you don't know if they have been distancing, because COVID is transmissible for about 2 days before you get any symptoms. So just because they don't have symptoms doesn't mean they're not around somebody. But opening the window and using fans is a really good way to disperse all the micro droplets and the respiratory droplets that carry it. So in addition to staying distanced, if somebody comes over to our house, we open up the doors and the windows and we put a fan on so it can circulate the air around.
That is smart. We've had we have had to have people in the house too, so we'll definitely keep that in mind.
You were making fun of this earlier. You're like,
yeah. I wasn't making fun of it. I was just saying that looks painful and uncomfortable, which is why I vote on staying home.
Don't get the plastic ones. The plastic ones hurt. You get the metal ones you can open, but the plastic ones are not cool.
Yeah.
The metal ones are okay.
So one thing I just want to because these comments are just getting me, and it just to me, for someone who has done clinical research really with the hopes of getting effective innovations to the communities that need it most, this just shows how much work we have to continue to do to educate people around the significance of this, and educating people, meeting them where they are as it relates to our genetics and genomics and why these things and these conversations are so important. Dr. Bankston, so what other things around, because we had a conversation before the conversation, but what are some of the other things that, I'm just trying to ease people pain points of just trying to understand the importance of clinical trials, because people are bringing out HIV/AIDS. We've already reassured people of the training that needs to take place in order to move things forward. Dr. Renee, is it that we need to have it go through the church for it to be vetted?
I think every place that it's some place that you would listen to. So I do believe the church leaders need to talk about it as well. Yeah. I totally agree. And I think, even as simple, yes, clinical trials, but even as simple as please wear your mask and this is how you should wear them.
Yeah.
And one thing, actually, you're exactly right. My mother was saying that people in her church, some are wearing masks, some aren't. And she said, if the pastor told us to wear it, if there were a law, then we would obey the rule of law and the pastor would tell us to wear it. And so it was interesting being in Atlanta where our mayor passed a mask ordinance and then the Republican governor is like, that's not enforceable. You can't do that. And so Keisha Vance Bottoms is like, how do I keep my people safe? One of the things about coronavirus is it's so hyper-local. It's little flares of fires that come up. And you can't treat people the same way or just do the same safety things for the whole country or for the whole, for the whole state. You've got to know there's places that are flaring up. Mm-hmm. One thing I think it's really important to understand about clinical research. First of all, it is not only so recent that the laws have been in place. 50 years, but the fact that in my lifetime Tuskegee was still going on, that's recent. And so I understand it takes a long time to get over that, but we also know it's not done. Even with coronavirus, there were people saying, well, let's test the vaccine in Africa. First of all, it's one country. Second of all, there is this whole concept of some people are worth more than others, and so let's test it someplace else. That's real, and I understand that, and that exists. So it's important. This is going to take time, but one thing I think it's really important to know is, particularly for cancer trials, outcomes are better if you're in a clinical trial, because the best medicines, the newest medicines, the most sophisticated combinations of medicines, those are in the clinical trials for cancer. And so if nothing else, I just hope that people, if you've got a family member who's got cancer, try to find a clinical trial. One of the problems of being in smaller areas of the country is they're not close to big research institutions, so they're getting treatments that are 10 years old. The way to get the best treatment for things like cancer that moves fast is be part of a clinical trial.
Yeah, and COVID, if you have a family member that has COVID-19 or had COVID-19, right now we do know one treatment that works is the antibodies. Mm-hmm. So if you could hurry up and get that person tested to find out if they have the antibodies, and then if they could donate those antibodies to someone that has COVID-19, we know that this works. This mm-hmm. could make their course much shorter. which could in the end, long run, save their lives. So please, if you do have a relative or you yourself, please have yourself tested for the antibodies, and then and you should not have to pay for this. So make sure you talk to the doctor. They should know. It's pretty much well known now. I've seen even TV commercials about it now. So please make sure you talk to your physician and you let them know, I was positive. I would like to, donate my antibodies. If I have them, can you please have me tested, and go about the process. Like I said, it should not cost you anything, but it could save lives. So please, let's do that. And and also, Dr. Bankston is one person doing a clinical trial. There are lots of clinical trials going on, because I will say the one thing about coronavirus, it's affected the entire world. It's not a localized thing. It's a global thing. And so everyone is trying to hurry up and find this vaccine. They are trying as fast as they can, as quick as they can, to find the best way to get this out of here, so we can all, resume some sort of normalcy. So there should be no place that you cannot find something about a clinical trial. And, if you live in a smaller town, that might be more difficult, but there are a lot of clinical trials going on, and they're trying to figure out how can we best hurry up and get this thing going. I think I just saw something today on somebody it was showing a picture of someone receiving a shot of the vaccine that they're working on someplace. And I didn't get a chance to read the article, but that's what I'm saying. It's really everywhere. They're trying to figure this out.
Yeah, there's actually a nasal vaccine that was very promising that they got results in mice, but in Alabama, they just published that last week. And we have a distributor in Brazil, and apparently they're also working on a nasal vaccine in Brazil. And so because of a lot of different aspects of respiratory viruses, I'm hopeful that the ultimate vaccine we get ends up being intranasal, because it'll be easier to take and it's more likely to stop the action right where it starts.
Awesome.
There's an interesting, so one thing, a study I just read last week that was done in Cincinnati, and that's where I trained in Children's Hospital of Cincinnati. But in the adult hospital, they looked at characteristics of coronavirus and found a couple things for their hospitalized patients that other studies haven't seen. And again, this gets back to the fact that about 50% of their population was African American. So they saw some trends that other places didn't with different populations. One thing they found was anemia was a risk factor, not just sickle cell, but different kinds of anemia. And that's something that can disproportionately affect the Black population. The other thing they found was hypercholesterolemia. So people whose cholesterol was up were also disproportionately affected. And I think that this is a good time to also mention that if you're on a drug for cholesterol or you're on a drug for hypertension, the studies have shown that staying on the drug did not cause any better or worse outcomes. So if you're already on a medicine, don't stop taking it. That's still helpful for the disease that you're taking it for, and it's not going to change your risk of coronavirus severity.
Yeah, so don't, please, if you take nothing from this conversation, we are not saying we are guinea pigs. People like me and you and Kornelius, we need to volunteer, because if they come out with a vaccine and none of us have ever volunteered, that vaccine could kill us. Now, you may not be interested in take the vaccine, but I just told Kornelius and Dr. Bankston beforehand that if the vaccine, which it probably will be necessary to leave the country, I need the vaccine because I'm getting out of here as fast as I can. So I need the vaccine. So therefore, I don't want it to kill me because no one volunteered that had the opportunity to volunteer for the clinical trial. So don't take it as us being guinea pigs. And also, please look at who is asking you. If it is somebody you don't trust, then please, by all means, don't do it. But as Kornelius said, there are institutions that are doing this work that are, Morehouse, Howard, if you don't know, these are historically Black colleges and universities. These places are doing the research. If you don't trust us, I don't know what to tell you then. Yeah. But please, know that we might be able to help ourselves here if we could just be a part of the clinical trial. If we're not a part of the trial, we cannot be surprised when the numbers don't change for our deaths.
Right. Well, and honestly, one of the things about nasal irrigation is that it's over the counter. It's already well proved for viruses, and it's not a drug. One of the things that has been a hallmark of what I do and why Kornelius is on my board is because I think that the pharma industry really has taken over our practice of medicine. So I think that there are things that are natural. There are things that are like vitamin D, like quercetin, like food, like plant-based diets. There are a lot of things that nobody makes any money on. And so there's no research done on them. There's no reason to fund research when nobody's going to benefit.
Thank you.
Monetarily, you know?
She's not making money off of this, y'all.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot to say that. So neither me or her are making any money off of giving you this information.
I'm losing money.
Zero. We are trying to inform you. And Dr. Baxter, I heard Kornelius say, is funding this research herself. So, and I don't think she has much stake in the game. She looks like she's a white woman. So you guys, come on. So,
you're right.
So this question says, I hear you stating the factors that targets Blacks, but what I haven't heard are side effects of this vaccine. So basically, we're all in different race. When you volunteer for clinical trial, let me know. So the thing is, we don't have a vaccine yet. So therefore, we can't say anything about the side effects of it.
Yeah, and this is not a vaccine trial. What I'm doing is what I do myself. So once I realized that nasal irrigation probably could make a big difference in people getting sick, I got a NeilMed irrigator, and I've been using it twice a day if I'm around people I don't know, and once a week or so, I don't know, whenever I'm around people where I don't know if the air has possibly been infected. So when my daughter came home from work and she started feeling badly, I was using it twice a day. So I'm definitely already using this myself. The question, and this isn't a vaccine, this is not going to keep you from getting it. You can't just go into a room of coronavirus and be safe. This is just a way to clear it off so that the disease either is less severe or you don't end up getting hospitalized or in oxygen. And I would go into a vaccine clinical trial. That said, I don't know. I'm probably going to wait for a little bit after the vaccines come out also, because I think that there's one of the issues with respiratory vaccines is that if you get the actual disease later, sometimes, like in this one, your immune system is what's ramped up. So I am hopeful that a vaccine is going to help us, but I'm not sure, and I'm waiting for the trials to get finished because there is a risk with respiratory vaccines. I think we may end up needing to wear masks for years. I think we may end up needing to have things that stop it from going up our nose. And if we can prove that if you do nasal irrigation, that you're safer and less likely to transmit it to your family, that's going to be huge, because this isn't going away in the next year.
Right. And I mean, and honestly, the nasal irrigation, you could just add that to washing your hands in the sanitizer. You know, just like we've said several times over, soap is extremely powerful. Very, very powerful. Please wash your hands. There's a reason we say that. Soap is something that viruses do not like. So if you keep your hands washed, you can really repel the virus. There, you can see there's all sorts of, even on my YouTube channel, I have an experiment I did with one of my teenage friends, and she showed how the virus was repelled because of soap. So wash your hands, but also clean out your nasal passages so that just in case you were exposed, you clear it out. So those that are leaving the home, and maybe you're on the front lines, you're, transportation worker, or you're an essential worker, you're a doctor, nurse, or something. When just like you come home and take your clothes off and take a shower, do a nasal irrigation.
So that's the thing I like about Dr. Baxter and the work that she's doing, right? This is like something that all of us, people of color, if you don't have to have large sums of money, you could just try this on your own and see if it works, right, for yourself. Or Dr. Baxter, could you tell them a little bit more about your trial and who you're focused on and how long is the trial? So people can be a little bit more informed about why we're all here talking today, in addition to, providing great information about COVID and talking about.
So we are doing the trial at Augusta University in Augusta, Georgia. It will probably start in the next 2 weeks. We are getting the final Institutional Review Board documents put in today. It'll probably take a week or two for those to be reviewed to make sure that the numbers are enough that we'll be able to see a difference, to make sure that there's enough patients who are getting tested. But when patients are tested for coronavirus, they will be given a piece of paper that says, if you're over the age of 50 or 55, we're still deciding, if you're over the age of 55 and you test positive, when we contact you, we'll offer you the opportunity to be in a study, and so to decrease the severity. And so at that time, if somebody gets called and they're positive, they'll be asked if they want to be in a study where they're going to get something that may help them reduce the severity. If they want to, then we'll give them a nasal rinse kit and 14 days worth of 2 packets a day. So you don't want to just put water up your nose. Oh, and by the way, you got to boil the water or use distilled water, because you don't want to put water up your nose that could have parasites in it or anything else. So the instructions of every one of these says it, but just to reiterate, so we're going to be giving distilled water and one of the 2 devices. And then what we're actually testing is, we figure that because it feels weird, not everybody's going to do it twice a day like they're supposed to. So the big thing we're curious about is, the more you do it, is that what's associated with lower symptoms and with less likelihood of hospitalization. We are going to have half the people do it with a little extra baking soda, which is the part to bring the pH up, the alkalinization, and half of them do it with half a teaspoon of betadine. Betadine is what you use when you've got sinus infections chronically. They'll flush the nose out and do nasal irrigation for sinus infections with a little bit of betadine before surgery, or if somebody gets an actual bacterial sinus infection. So so one of those 2 things is what we're looking at, but what our real hypothesis is that probably it's just flushing it out that's the most important. When, as an emergency doctor, if I have someone come in with a cut that I'm going to sew up, the first thing I do is I'm going to irrigate it flush it out with saline 3 times as strongly as I can, because that gets the bacteria off and makes it much less likely to get infected. So I think it's probably going to be the same kind of thing. I think if you do it twice a day and you flush your nose out, that's probably more important than adding the baking soda or adding the betadine. Yes, you can use store-bought betadine. It is 10% is what all of they come in a little bottle. I got mine on Amazon. It's like $2 a bottle, but you only want to use a half a teaspoon. So just a little bit, and yes, you can use it in a neti pot. But remember to boil the water first and let it cool off, or distill it to make sure that there's no parasites in it.
I missed it, but somebody had a question saying, is there any problems if you do it too much?
Well, I don't know is the best answer. One of the studies that was done at NYU Langone, they did 4 times a day, and but they only did spray. They didn't do a full rinse. Now, there are people, when they're preparing for sinus surgery, that will do it 3 times a day with the betadine. I mean, I think the biggest thing to know is if you have an allergy to iodine or shellfish, then I wouldn't use the betadine. You could use hydrogen peroxide, because that also kills coronavirus, but you don't need much, like, a half a teaspoon. But I don't know if there's an upper limit. There are multiple studies that looked at the betadine rinses to prove that they were safe before surgery and safe for people that had sinus infections. But I don't recall off the top of my head how many times a day they did it. I think it was 2, but I'm not sure. So I don't know.
Okay, well, this has been a very hot topic, as I said, and a great conversation. We will definitely, keep following and figuring it out. And, if we whatever information that we get, we try to bring to you guys here at blackdoctor.org. And so please, if you have the opportunity to participate in a clinical trial, please consider it. I mean, like I said, if we aren't in the trial, then the drugs are not going to be for us. So what we don't want to happen is all this work next spring when they decide to say, here's the vaccine, and there hasn't been anybody that looked like us in those trials. So we want to make certain that we are making sure that our voices are heard and that they are actually testing it on our genomes, because like I said, not everyone is built the same. And there's so many different places in medicine that we've already seen this. We don't want to see, this happen again when it comes to the vaccine. So there's several people on here that have had coronavirus or currently do, and I'm so sorry. And I hope that you all will get well soon. I did see all your questions about the openings of schools, but these are not the 2 people we're going to talk to about that. But we will make sure that we will get that this discussed as well. And to all the red states, because there's a whole lot of states that are right now having severe surges. Please, you guys, they haven't said it yet, but just stay home. because the stay-at-home order, I swear it's around the corner. It's around the corner for many of the states, including the one that these two are in. It is coming very soon. So, so please just wash your hands, social distance, and perhaps by Christmas we can actually hug our relatives. Okay,
Nice.
that'd be great, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Bankston, do you have any last words?
I got one story about racial and genetic differences. So my roommate in med school is Black, and she's a pediatrician also. So I took my kids to her when they were little, and they were, I think, the only white kids in her practice. Well, I was out of town, and my mother-in-law is staying with me, and all three of our kids get lice. And so my mother-in-law takes them to Leslie and is like, so Dr. Myers, do you think that this is lice? And she said, you know what? My kids in my practice don't get lice. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, they're gross, whatever it is. Let's treat it like it's lice. But my three kids were the first three kids to ever she saw it with lice in her practice. I'm so proud. So so we laughed a lot about that, and she was like, well, so what was it? Were they lice? And I was like, yeah, they were nasty.
Oh, wow.
Anyhow, they're just, there are some differences. And
Honestly, I just learned this year or last year that Black people actually can get lice. I guess it's just extremely uncommon, because when lice would pass through my schools, my mother never was worried, and I never complained. My sister never had a problem, but all the kids, like our whole classroom would have it, but not us.
Yeah.
And so, but like I said, I just learned from some pediatrician friends that they were like, no, we can.
Yeah, and Black kids usually will get ringworm, and white kids rarely do. It's just it's the different texture and characterization of the scalp. But.
Yep.
Wow.
Well, thank you guys so much. I so appreciate you, and good work, Dr. Baxter. I might actually go and invest in a neti pot now, but I seen him on TV. And I think that's what it would be. I have to get used to it, but I'm definitely, because it was been suggested because of my outdoor allergies, and I like to be on the lakefront. I think that I might invest in one, so we'll see. But thank you so much, you guys. Thank you so much for being the active audience that you guys always are. And please continue to share and start watch parties for this video. And we'll see you next time on blackdoctor.org. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.